Hello, Internet, and welcome to episode number 212. I can't believe it. 212 of the Comic Watchers Show. I'm Matt, and with me, as usual, is Chad. Chad's lost his voice temporarily, but he is here with us in spirit, and eventually he'll be able to pipe up. But we have got this week a very special guest. We've got Mr. Mike Marts, the editor-in-chief at Mad Cave Studios. Mike, how are you?
I'm good, Matt. It's good to join you guys here on the podcast.
Brother, we're psyched to be here too. So, first of all, 10 years of Mad Cave. Congratulations. I know you haven't been there that whole time, but that's
Right.
that's big. I mean, a decade in the comics publishing business. That's these days,
It
especially, that's a feat.
It's something
How
to
do you
be
feel about that?
very, very, very proud of. I mean, yeah, it's funny. I mean, I've been there a little less than 2 years, but you think about all that the company has done in just 10 years, and for a lot of people working there, it's like it's gone by in an instant.
Right.
And it's a little like hard to believe that it's been 10 years, but yeah, and these days in the comic industry, that's something to be really proud of. And so we're wearing that badge of pride on our sleeve, and we're celebrating our 10th year anniversary all year long, with various different things, and it's just a great time to be working at the company.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's put the Mad Cave in the parking lot just for a second, and let's dial it back a little bit because people may not know who you are that are listening. Can you tell us a little bit about your comics experience, your history as both a reader and as a professional?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like a lot of us, I grew up reading comics from a very early age. I think I started around age 10. And, for me, actually, I felt like I was starting late at age 10. Other friends of mine and my sister had started reading before that. I was mostly a diehard Marvel fan growing up, and the X-Men was basically my thing. And, all throughout my teen years, as my collection grew, my interest grew, I just really wanted to be Chris Claremont. That was like my aspiration, my goal, the thing that I knew I was put on this earth to do. I was like, if anyone's going to succeed, Chris Claremont, it's going to be me. I'd lived, breathed, and ate X-Men all day long. So as I got into college and I was getting a little more serious with myself and thinking about professions and things like that, I started studying journalism at school, and I got into editing and writing, and I thought, oh, maybe I can kind of combine my interest in comics and my professional work. And so I started writing comic scripts, just like one-page story ideas, and I would submit them to Marvel. I do one a week, and I would send one in each week. And sometimes I'd get the very polite rejection letter back in the mail. Sometimes I wouldn't. But it just kind of got me into this habit of like trying to break in and trying to become a writer. And then around that same time, just kind of serendipitously, I was made aware that there was a internship program at Marvel. And I think in between my junior and senior year of college, I started interning there, and I worked in the editorial department, mostly in like the what they called the West Coast Avengers office. So I was working on Iron Man and War Machine and Scarlet Witch and Hawkeye, and West Coast Avengers, which eventually became Force Works. And I started there at Marvel, and I feel like I just I did leave, but I never left. I stayed in the comic industry from that point forward, and that was a little over 30 years ago. I've had 3 different stints at Marvel in my life. Most of that time I was working on the X-Men books. In the early 2000s, I was the group editor on the X-Men books, and then
What a time to have that assignment.
it was great. I mean,
Man.
we had Joss Whedon's Astonishing X-Men, Grant Morrison's New X-Men. We had the introduction of Exiles by Judd Winnick.
Yeah.
Chris Claremont returns Uncanny X-Men for a while. There was Wolverine Origin. So many awesome things to work on during that time. I was really lucky, and just as I kind of felt like I'm really loving this, and I'm getting to do everything I wanted to do on X-Men. I got Ed Brubaker on Uncanny, and I got oh God, I'm trying to think. Sorry. Brubaker was a real catch on Uncanny,
Sure.
and then right around that time, DC came calling, and they were very interested in me coming over and becoming the Batman group editor. So,
Boy, how do you turn that assignment down?
right. So I left Marvel and I went over to work at DC for about 8 years as group editor on the Batman books. Got to team up again with Grant Morrison on Batman and Robin and Batman Incorporated, and then was there when Scott Snyder was first writing Detective, and then moved on to writing the Batman book, and we did New 52. And
what an interesting time to have been at DC as an editor, though, bridging that time between pre and post New 52. That had to have been challenging.
Yeah, it was amazing. The day that I got there, this was 2006, so it was, I don't know, 4 years before New 52, but Dan DiDio had that idea of New 52 in his head. He would talk about that type of story, that type of event pretty frequently. And there was a few opportunities where we thought it was going to happen and then it wouldn't happen, but then eventually the stars aligned, and we came together and came up with this big plan of New 52. And, in hindsight, I mean, I know a lot of people are kind of critical of it and aren't the biggest fans, but being an editor there at that time, it was extremely exciting.
Sure.
Taking 52 titles and breathing new life into them.
It's a huge risk. I mean, and when you're relaunching an entire line, not just relaunching an entire line, but also 52 comics at number one, all in the span of a month. I mean, not everything's going to hit, right? Not everything's going to hit its audience, and that's just numbers. And,
exactly.
But the thing that people tend to forget about New 52 is, while they're busy bad mouthing it or whatever, is risks were taken, right? And you just don't see as much risk taking at the big two, not at that level.
Right. That was I think at the highest level of anything that I've been involved in at the big two companies. That was the riskiest. And but we took chances on some new writers, some new artists. I think a lot of good came out of that. But just the collaboration between creative and editorial at that time was at such a high, and the demand to get these books out on time and the on time, the track record there during New 52 was so high. The scheduling and starting in advance really helped the whole program out.
Yeah. And then after you left DC, I believe you wound up at Aftershock, and
almost. It's funny. Yeah. So DC was preparing to move their offices to Burbank, to Florida. So they were leaving the New York area, and they offered everyone on staff the opportunity to go out to California, and they made it very attractive with relocation programs and everything. But it was tough for me. My family was here in the New York area. I had a house, I had a kid, and I just wasn't able to make that move to DC as much as the move to California as much as I wanted to. So I was really fortunate that my friends at Marvel, specifically publisher and president Dan Buckley, was able to extend a hand and say, "Hey, we'd love to have you back." So I went back for about a year and a half, where I was executive editor there, and I was back on the X-Men for a while, working with Brian Bendis, which was amazing. And also working on the Guardians of the Galaxy books at the same time that the first movie came out. So that was great. I mean, I think my first week back at Marvel, they said, "All right, here's the Guardians of the Galaxy movie script. We're going to lock you in this room don't come out until you finish reading it. I was like, okay, I'll do it. I'll do it. No problem. Um, and yeah, so I mean, it was great to be back at Marvel for a third time, um, and really wonderful to work on the X-Men again, and great working on Guardians of the Galaxy. I never in a million years thought I'd be working on Guardians of the Galaxy. Um, but about a year and a half into it, I got a call from an old friend of mine, Joe Pruitt, who I'd worked with at Marvel. Him as a writer, me as his editor, and he said he was starting up this new venture called Aftershock, which was going to be specifically creator-owned comics. And after 20 years of doing superhero comics, I mean, I loved it. It's how I got into the business. But at a certain point, you get this feeling like I'm challenged to do more. I'm challenged to move into new areas and see how I can contribute to the industry in a different way. And the idea of doing creator-owned comics, plus the idea of starting your own company, building something from the ground up, it was really attractive. And again, it was a risk, a very personal risk on my part, but it was worth it. It was totally worth it. And the books that we were able to create there with fantastic creators.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the bar at Aftershock was so high. I mean, just yeah, absolutely. Mark of quality.
No, appreciate that. Appreciate that. That
Absolutely,
was
man.
that was
Yeah.
one of the main goals was high quality.
Well, I'd say you guys succeeded. And now you've been lured over to Mad Cave just in time.
Yeah,
Well, not just in time, but a little before for their 10th anniversary.
yeah. Mad Cave, came on my radar. I think probably around the same time that everyone else. When Nottingham came out
Mhm.
and became such a big hit, and actually, I was sitting in the aftershock at that time. I was like, David Hazan, and one of the guys that was working with me there said, "You have to read this book. You have to read this book, and we have to get David Hazan to work with us." Um, so Mad Cave came on my radar at that point, and I would also see them at conventions, and they were just always like the super friendly, upbeat, positive people when you saw them at conventions. And and then another thing happened which really got my attention with Mad Cave, and that was the acquisition of Paper Cuts in the summer of 2022.
Mhm.
And Paper Cuts was or is a serious player within middle grade publishing. And for me, I'm taking a look at this. I'm being like, Mad Cave, a comic publishing company, mostly known for their homegrown product, is going out purchasing a middle grade publisher. They're serious. They're in this to make a difference, to make a statement, and to change things within this industry. And I was like, this is a company to watch. And it was really just like a month later that a mutual friend of mine and Mad Cave CEO Mark London kind of connected the two of us.
Mhm.
And he, my friend, had told me that Mad Cave is looking for an editor in chief type position. And I was more than happy to talk to Mark London. And after just one session with him, I was I was hooked. I was hooked. I don't know if you've ever met or talked to Mark, but he is just so positive and just so let's meet the challenge. Let's take this risk. Let's do it. Let's try. And that was the thing that really won me over and said,
Yeah.
this is a company that I want to be a part of.
Yeah.
And as I joined them and I learned, more of their plans, things that I wasn't even aware of at that time, I was blown away.
And now fast forward a year and a half later, and I mean, what can you say about the experience so far? Like, how does the energy of Mad Cave compare? And I don't necessarily mean like in a negative sense or anything, of course, but How does it compare to some of the other experiences that you've had? I mean, you have had a 3-decade career.
Yeah, I've experienced a lot, and you see that after working at different companies that some of them operate very similarly in certain ways, and then some of them are quite different from one another. And I think a lot of a lot of the differences you see is how leadership approaches new ideas, new challenges. Because, like we were saying earlier in the podcast, the comic industry, the publishing industry is really challenging. And every time you go out there with something new, trying to attract new readers, it's a risk. And you're really putting yourself out there. Um, Mad Cave takes that challenge and says, let's do it. Let's try. If we don't quite hit the mark, we're going to learn from this experience and apply it to the next challenge. Um, so that's a big thing. That's kind of a part of the essence of Mad Cave.
Right.
Another thing is how we how we deal with the creators and how we treat the creators. They are our partners in everything we do, whether it's creator owned, whether it's work for hire, whether it's licensed work. We're working with them day in, day out. And just like publishers, they're taking the same type of risks. Very few people in this industry will end up becoming millionaires. Most of us in this industry are making a living and doing it because we love the craft and we love the industry and we love original graphic novels and we love comic books. So these creators, they're risking everything just like we are. We take the position that we understand that, and we try to apply extreme TLC into everything we do with our creators, whether it's how soon we pay them, what we pay them, how soon we reply to their emails, how soon we respond to new ideas or pitches that they turn in, and how we treat them at conventions. And that's an attitude that goes from the very top with Mark London all the way to our sales and marketing staff. They're out at conventions, or the people inside the home office that handle paychecks and accounting and things like that. So the entire company has this attitude and understands that without the creators, we don't have the product. Hey, Chad.
Hi.
Chad is here.
Yes.
Chad, I'm glad you could join us officially.
So,
You were
yes.
unofficially joining us the whole time in
Yes.
spirit and in icon
Talking.
and in, yes, listening. But hey, man, jump in.
Yeah. So, you kind of, do you actively look for creators, or do creators come to you and pitch stuff?
All of the above. Part of the job is specifically targeting people within the industry that we want to work with but haven't been working with already. And that could be high profile creators, or it could be the new person that's kind of like a rising star. We also have people come to us, maybe cold pitching us. Some people do it through the submissions portal on the website, just cold pitching us like that. And there's been, half a dozen projects that we've accepted that way. Sometimes not from the biggest names in the industry, but we felt the idea was big and special enough, and it was worth taking a risk on. Just, for example, there's a book that we recently did called When the Blood Has Dried, and that was from a creator, Gary Maloney and Daniel Romero. They pitched us on our submissions portal site, and we reviewed it. We said, this is Mad Cave material. This is what we want to do. So the ideas, the stories, the pitches, the proposals, they come from different directions. Sometimes it's us actively trying to get certain people, and sometimes it's people coming to us. Sometimes they're faces we know, sometimes they're faces that we're just getting to know.
I was going to say because I mean you're publishing, you know, uh, runs the spectrum of everything. I mean, you have The Devil Who Wears My Face, but our good friend David Pepose. You have, you know, the upcoming Dick Tracy series. So I just like how you, as the publisher, this kind of encompasses all the different genres the of comics.
Yeah, that's intentional on our parts. One of the I think one of the foundations of the company these days is that we are a publisher where we're creating comics for everyone. And that goes to people like the three of us who have been around reading comics for a long time, all the way down to my daughter who's you know 14. She's looking at YA material, or my other younger daughter who in a few years will be reading younger reader stuff or middle grade material. um, we have a few different imprints, three at this point, and each one is targeted towards a different age demographic. And then, within Mad Cave proper, where we're kind of catering towards teen and adult readers, we have creator-owned books. We have things that we develop in-house that we term as homegrown, and then we have a few licenses as well. This past year we announced, like you said, Dick Tracy. We announced Flash Gordon. We announced Gotcha Man. Um, so we are intentionally spreading ourselves around and trying to cater to all types of fans and all types of readers of different ages and different interests. And within the creator owned space, we're also focusing on many different genres. Not so much superheroes. We figure superheroes are covered elsewhere pretty well, but everything else, horror, sci-fi, fantasy, historical, crime, western, you name it.
So just kind of to, as editor in chief, what are your overall duties? You know, for the, do you oversee the line or a certain line or both, all three, two of them, or sorry, three?
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so all three imprints, which are Mad Cave for adult and teen, Maverick for our young adult audience, and then Paper Cuts, which is for our middle grade readers. Um, all three of those imprints I'll oversee, and manage the various editors who work in those respective imprints. Um, a lot of it is quality control. I've taken my years of experience at the other companies and honing good comics and making sure that every comic that we do has the Mad Cave stamp of quality, for lack of a better term. I read every single balloon that gets published from Mad Cave. I look at every single piece of art. I review every single cover and make sure that they're all up to the standards of quality that we need them to be at. And another big part of the job is acquisitions, because we realize we're doing great projects today, and we have a great roster of books that we're publishing today. But we're looking ahead. Our 2025 is already mapped out. We're looking ahead to 2026. We're in this for the long haul. We know that we're going to need new projects over the next bunch of years. Some projects are going to cycle out. Maybe some won't sell quite as well as we hoped, and we've got to bring in new things. So the process of acquiring new projects is always an ongoing one, and we look to many different areas for new ideas.
With that in mind, and I don't know how I'm trying to say what I'm trying to say. With all of that in mind and all the different genres that you play in, I mean, do you just as a reader have any particular favorites that you're like, oh yeah, this just really speaks to me?
Yeah, there's a project that debuted just a few months ago. It was called Dear Editor,
Yes.
and it was a 3-issue series, and it was with two gentlemen that I've worked with before, Ryan Lindsay and Sammy Cavella, both extremely talented guys. Um, and it was a project that more or less just kind of just fell into our laps one day. Um, they had been developing it and working on it for a while, and one day, I guess word of mouth spread to them. They heard that Mad Cave was a good place for them to work, and they sent us the project over. And it was one of those really easy approvals. It's like, we saw it, we read it, fell in love with it, and said, let's do this and let's put it out as soon as we can. That's one personal favorite of mine from recently.
Mm-hmm.
There's another project coming up. We haven't quite announced it yet, but it'll fall in the autumn of this year, and it's with two creators that I've already talked about on this podcast already. But that one, it's actually a project that when I was at Aftershock we reviewed, and I was really into it, but not everyone else was, and we let it go. And I was always like, oh man, like why did we let that go? And when I got here to Mad Cave, they were like, oh, we're doing this project. I'm like, oh, that one, fantastic! I can't believe we picked that up. So that's another favorite. I wish I could talk about it a little bit more.
Yes.
So, are there any creators that you would really want to work with in the future?
There's many people that I've worked with previously, either at Marvel or DC or Aftershock, that I would love to bring over here to Mad Cave. Um, you know, I know his dance card is really full, but my good friend Scott Snyder, I'd always love to get teamed up with him again. Paul Dini is another one. Andy Kubert, um, Tony Daniel, um, Grant Morrison, Garth Ennis. Um, it's really an endless list. There's so many good, talented people in this comics community, and I've been fortunate to have worked with so many of them, and it'd be fantastic to re-team with them again. And the artist list is also endless as well.
Sure.
People like Eleonora Carlini, Annika, just so many great artists out there.
Yeah. So, as editor in chief, you're kind of like the big guy who's calling all the shots, except for Mark London. And I'm curious, what being in that particular position, what is your managerial philosophy? How do you lead, especially when you're dealing with creative voices all day long?
Well, the trick with working with creators day in and day out is that you, I think, have to approach it a lot like a sports coach would act. I always think of a baseball manager as a great analogy for an editor in chief. You're really trying to take these superstars and get the best work, the best performance out of them. The trick is knowing when to stay out of the way and let them do their thing, and then also knowing when might be the right opportunity to step in and suggest, you know what, you should hold your bat this way, because you'll get a better swing and you'll get a better hit by doing it that way.
Right.
Most creators at this point, they're happy to get that type of coaching and shepherding. And that analogy extends into other areas as well, because beyond working with the superstars, whether it's the LeBron James or whoever, you also have to think about who's going to be in the next draft class. Like, who is the talent that I'm going to be acquiring for tomorrow? Who's going to be the superstar of tomorrow? Because it's all cyclical. We all get older. Some of us retire, some of us stop working. So you always have to think about who's sitting on the bench. Who is that artist of tomorrow? Who is that person that I can help shepherd, to kind of grow into that big artist, for upcoming books. And also, like, you were talking about, being, the big cheese, and there's Mark London. But I should also mention the executive staff at Man Cave.
Sure.
Also includes our senior vice president, Mark Irwin, who is essential to everything we do day to day, and also our publisher, Chris Fernandez, who, without him, we wouldn't have books being on time and going to the printer, and our entire, scheduling lineup, and just the way that everything is arranged is all due to him. Contracts for the creators and everything. So it's a really good team. And besides, Mark London, but besides him being a part of why I wanted to come to the company, after speaking with Chris Fernandez and Mark Irwin, I was super convinced. And Mark Irwin's actually someone that I've known close to 30 years, maybe not quite, but we had worked in an editor freelancer capacity for many years, both at Marvel and DC.
So, going back to what you were talking about, who are the creators, writers, artists that you kind of have your eye on, who you think might be the next, people to collaborate with?
Well, we have so many good books that we're doing in the creator-owned space right now, and some of these creators are people that Mad Cave took a chance on. Maybe names that aren't known to everyone in the reading audience right now, but we think have the potential to be big names of tomorrow. There's a book we did late last year. Amit Tischler, and we just announced his new project, The Last Wardens. And Amit is a phenomenal writing talent, and we feel he's going to be delivering more great stuff in years to come. Also, we had a creator-owned book. It was our first creator-owned book, Don't Spit in the Wind, which was from an Italian writer-artist, Stefano Cardicelli. Fantastic talent. Just really thinks about things from just a graphic storytelling angle, and sees things through his artistic lens that other people can't see. And he's also doing a new book with us called Love Me, a romance story, which I think comes out this month, along with Francesca Perillo, his creative partner. Those are just a few names, but there's also a book that we have coming out next month called Mugshots, and that's by Jordan Thomas. And Jordan is a writer who I've known for several years now, and had pitched me some really solid ideas in the past, a bunch of which came really close, but Mugshots was the first one that I said, this has what it takes to be something really special. And him, along with his artist, Chris Matthews, have created this just thrilling noir crime story set in an English seaside town. It's great. It feels like almost like a Scorsese picture.
Oh, wow. Very cool. Very cool. So I guess the flip side is you've said superheroes pretty well covered, not really going to be Mad Cave's claim? Is there anything that you've kind of turned down and said, this just isn't quite us, outside of the realm of superheroes, I should say?
Yeah, I mean that will happen, and it's often kind of hard to quantify. It's easier to say like what works for us. We know when an idea hits us and it's new, it's unique, it's something we haven't seen before. Other times, we may pass on projects maybe because they're just like a glut in the market right now, those type of stories. And you see it happening in cycles. And I've seen myself at different times over the years saying like to a writer, we're good on vampire stories. There's too many vampire projects out there. As much as I love vampires, there's too many vampire projects. Robert Kirkman has spoiled zombie comics for everyone, because
yeah, thanks, Robert.
he created the best zombie thing ever, and now it's hard to compete with something like that. Even a year or two after it's not being published anymore, it's hard to compete with that. So, as an editor-in-chief or as a publisher, you're always trying to stay aware of market trends, knowing what's out there, what works, what doesn't work, what things to stay away from, and then also being aware of what we need. My editors and I did an exercise recently where we kind of sat down and thought about, what are those projects that we don't have yet? And we did this specifically like for the Paper Cuts line and for the Maverick line, and just really tried to nail down what types of projects don't we have and what could work, what trends are working right now. And like for instance, in a Maverick line, my senior editor there, Lauren, she knows exactly what the trends are out there right now, and she's always telling me, like cats with sweaters are in. All right, we got to look for a cats in sweaters project.
Call America Andolfo. She'll make it cute and sexy.
Yeah, Chrissy's Zulo on the phone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's funny. So, I mean, I guess at this point, like, there's so many comic publishers out there, and Marvel, DC, and Image have their rough percentage claims on the market every month that are more or less unchecked and challenged. How do you keep Mad Cave at a level where people are still engaged, are still talking about what you guys are, and not just moving on to the next hot publisher, if that makes sense?
No, totally makes sense. A lot of it has to do with just the idea of sticking to your guns, sticking to your mission statement, not being too concerned about the competitor noise that's going on around you. Because believe it or not, like when another company does something big, like take for instance Jeff Johns' Ghost Machine imprint, we hear about that and we're like, you know what? That's good for the industry. That's making noise. It's making people come into shops, and people might come into shops for Ghost Machine, and they might talk to the person behind the counter and say, "What else is cool right now?" And they're saying, "Have you checked out Mad Cave?" So other things that happen at other publishers, sometimes people think like we hear it and we're like, "Oh yeah, that's terrible," but a lot of times it's good because it helps out the industry. But for us, it's really sticking to the mission statement, sticking to our guns, and continuing to make the best possible product for all of our readers. Because doing that with consistently maintaining a high level of quality, the Mad Cave brand, the Mad Cave identity will continue to grow and grow and grow. Till we're here 10 years from now at the 20-year anniversary, and people look back and they say, Mad Cave is this monster. And it's because they kept putting out great product, great stories, great creators. They treated their creators wonderfully, and that's what people remember. And people will keep coming to that. So it's tricky sometimes. There's a lot of noise out there, and there are always going to be publishers that go away, and there's always going to be new publishers coming in. That's just a part of the business. But really just sticking to our core identity. I don't want to say like worrying about ourselves, but really just, worrying about ourselves. That's what's going to keep us consistent, what's going to keep us honest and true and dedicated to what we should be doing.
What are some pitfalls that you think Mad Cave has to avoid in order to not become one of those publishers of yesteryear?
Well, being too, I think, isolated in one area is a mistake these days. I do feel that as a company, diversifying yourself in terms of what you offer and who you're offering it to is important to stay alive, because you can see certain things which were super important and popular 10 years ago aren't quite as popular now, and things change. The book market is much bigger than it once was. Children's graphic novels are much bigger. Manga is enormous.
Monstrous.
Vertical scrolling comics is enormous. So keeping yourself as a publisher, keeping yourself flexible, and being able to offer the same consistent quality content to different people in different ways is important. And I think certain publishers who maybe have one specific way of doing thing, and it's narrow, that could end up being problematic in the future. It might work really well right now in 2024, but 3 or 4 years from now, I don't know if we can promise you that it's going to be as successful.
Chad?
So I was just kind of looking through my emails because I just the other night I talked with the writer for Knights of Justice, which is which I didn't know at the time was a '90s cartoon, and from that you guys are putting out. And is there something, we've talked about how you vet your books, or is there anything that you use when you vet like properties? Because I mean, you guys have Gotcha Man coming out. Um, is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. With the licenses that we do, we take a very specific approach. We're not eager to become a publisher that just does licenses. There are a few of them out there right now, and I'm sure they're very comfortable doing that. But that's not all we want to do. We don't want to do too many. So a lot of times we take a step back and we say, if we were readers, what properties would interest us? And that's how things like Flash Gordon and Gotcha Man and Dick Tracy and Disney too. Um, that's how all those deals came to be. They were specific things that the company was interested in, whether it was a group of us or if it was maybe one person speaking very passionately. That's how the King Arthur and the Knights of Justice happened. That along with Princess Guinevere were both cartoons that were done by a company called 41 Entertainment. And our Maverick editor was extremely passionate about these projects. And sometimes, when we see an editor or someone on staff acting that passionately about something, then the rest of us stop and we take notice and we look into it and say, maybe this is something worth doing. but all these licenses, we're just not putting them out there just to get product out there. They're things that we are legitimately interested in seeing new stories created for. And we're really lucky to be working with such fantastic licensing partners on each of these projects. And you can tell when we send new pages or new stories over to the licensor for approval, they're getting just as much joy out of it as we are, because they're seeing their creations, the thing that they own, getting new life breathed into them. And we hope that carries over into the reading audience and the retailer audience.
So what's the biggest difference between working for Mad Cave and say working for, Marvel and DC as, an editor?
Well, working at a place like Marvel or DC, um, they're they are companies that are focused on long running IP. Um, that is their bread and butter. Um, and a big part of the job as an editor for those companies is being the caretaker of those IPs and making sure they're taken care of and respected. And, you know, we're only working on them for a short while of their lifespan. I mean, I feel like I worked on Batman forever, but 8 years out of 80 years, it's not that long. But during those 8 years I was working on Batman, I had to make sure that Batman behaved the way he should, that continuity was respected, past stories, how he interacted with other characters. Um, and that's a challenge sometimes.
And then
I
New
think that's where
52 happened.
well, even with New 52, I think the essence of the spirit of the characters had to remain intact. But that, but you'd be surprised, like, respecting the integrity of the characters was sometimes a challenge. I tell this story a lot where I was working with Kevin Smith on Batman, The Widening Gyre, and he was writing it, and Walt Flanagan was drawing it, and working with Kevin was great. It was great, but sometimes a script would come in, and I'd be like,
Is
oh
this
man,
is this about
there's like
Batman peeing himself?
yeah, yeah. There's like five fart jokes and one dick joke, and I'm like, oh man, you know. So you have to you kind of bargain a little bit and what are we going to let pass and what are we let we're going to let Kevin have some fun. So it's a challenge. And the same holds true for Marvel. I mean, especially working on the X-Men. I was happy when I got to work on Batman because it was basically one character and his supporting cast of 10 people. X-Men was quite different. I was shepherding 50 different characters sometimes, and that was a big
50 if
challenge.
you're lucky.
Right. I know it was a lot. And then you kind of compare that to working at other companies, specifically Mad Cave. The goal of putting out great comics and working with creators is the same, but your focus is much different. Your focus is on creating new ideas, new properties, trying to create the projects that people are going to fall in love with and that are going to end up on t-shirts 5 or 10 years from now, the same way that the Marvel or DC characters have been for a long time. So the goal is really just different than working with characters. You're working on ideas and concepts and trying to birth them and have them grow into something big and something that's going to stick and something that's going to resonate. And it's always a risk, of 20 ideas. You don't know how many of those are actually going to take hold. That's why with Nottingham, Man Cave was so fortunate to have something that stuck kind of early on in the growth of the company. But the working at different companies, depending on what they're doing, it can be quite different. Other things remain, completely the same. Just getting pages in and proofing it and getting them lettered and getting them colored and working with creators. All that is the mechanics of it remain the same.
And are there any things that Mad Cave has put out, you know, that stand out for you as among your favorites? And you can, if you want to do like by the, from the different lines, that's also fine.
Yeah. I'll start with Maverick, our young adult line. We put out a book last year called Paper Planes, which I know I have here. So it's a YA, it's a coming of age original graphic novel. It deals with LGBTQ issues. This was done by Jenny Wood and Dozer Draws, and it's one of those books where like you get caught off guard. Like my job is to read scripts and comics all day long. I've read every different type of story in and out. I've seen everything. When I read this one, like I got that tear in my eye, and I was moved by it. So that, when something like that happens, you have something special on your hands. And I know that if I'm going to feel that as the experienced, veteran, jaded editor, then probably a good portion of our readership who decides to pick this up, they're going to feel that as well, and maybe even more so, because this moved a 50-year-old straight man, but imagine what it's going to do to that teen reader who might be going through different experiences that these characters are going through. Whether it's issues of sexuality and gender, or it's just the issues of being a teenager and going through that painful period. Readers are going to pick that up. It's going to stay with them, and it's going to be something that matters. So I mean, this was a definite favorite of mine.
Well, and I mean that diversification is key, right? Like we were our last episode, I think. I was talking about Ultimate X-Men by Peach Momoko, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not my cup of tea, but it doesn't have to be. And that's the thing that readers have to understand is, for me, the 43-year-old cishet jaded comics reader of yore, I'm not necessarily the target audience anymore, but that kid that grew up on Studio Ghibli maybe is for this book. And now there's something to lure that kid into reading comics, and maybe they'll discover something else. Maybe they'll just be happy with the Ultimate X-Men. Who knows? But getting more and more different kinds of material out there is the drum that I will just beat until the drum can be beat no more. And I feel like Mad Cave is definitely all about that vision too. And I think this conversation has, at numerous points in it, revealed that to be true. So, Mike, thank you and your team for what you're doing and to add to the diversification of the industry.
Oh, thanks. Well, you're welcome.
Yeah,
it's funny. A lot of us in Mad Cave, we say we wake up every day and we're super happy to be working at this company.
sure.
And we feel grateful and thankful that we're able to create these things and put them out there for new audiences.
Well, you should be happy. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Chad.
So, are you doing anything special to commemorate 10 years of Mad Cave? And, where do you see Mad Cave, 10 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, our whole line, every Mad Cave book that we're putting out this year will carry a special 10-year anniversary logo on it.
Okay.
We're also attending a bunch of big shows this year: C2E2, San Diego, New York Comic Con,
I'll see you
Baltimore.
there.
Okay, great. And at a few of these conventions, we're doing special 10-year anniversary panels where we have creators that we've worked with, both present and past, and also future, talking about projects that they've done before and also some things coming up. Excuse me. We're also celebrating in our own way, kind of throwing ourselves a little party at San Diego that, you know, where the team can come together and feel good about our accomplishments. And we're also celebrating in a way that we're going to have a few big announcements coming up over the next few months. Things that people are not going to be expecting at all, completely coming out of left field. And, you know, not to brag a little bit, but we feel that's kind of a cool way to celebrate our anniversary as well, is just kind of shocking and surprising people and coming, you know, just, you know, shouting out with some really cool new things.
Heck yeah, dude.
And where do you see Mad Cave in 10 years?
Yeah,
hope to see
in
it.
10 years, I see us as a top 5 publisher. I say that confidently. I know with the people that we have working with us, both on staff and creatively, we have what it takes to stay alive in this industry, to continue to make a difference in this industry with great new product, to continue to attract better and better talent each month. You could see it happening, you know, over the past few years. Each month we get the level of talent that we are attracting has risen. And I see us continuing to diversify and expand into different markets, new markets, areas where people might not expect to see us. But at the core, just continuing to tell great stories.
That's more than fair. I love it. I love to hear it. So, well, Mike, we're up against our hour. So, thank you so much for stopping by to chat with us tonight. Thank you and the entire Mad Cave team, and congratulations on 10 years of publishing excellence.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate the support that you guys give us.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, yeah, until next time, we are the Comic
Thursday.
Watchers, and this is our show. And this is
We're,
Mike
we're,
Marts.
we're back Thursday.
We're back Thursday. That's right. We're going to be back Thursday with writer. I just went blank. Jeff McComsey.
Oh, Jeff's great. You know,
Yes.
Jeff does work for us at Mad Cave.
That's awesome. Yeah, we really like his stuff over here. So until next time, get out there, do something good, support your local comic book store, and above all else, just be cool to the next guy over. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.